send it out into the world, and it would bring him back gold and silver and diamonds and precious things. And and basically man was free to be in a spiritual relationship with Hashem, to soar above and be relishing and be basking in the ore of Hashem. So who was taking care of the business? Who was minding the store? The Nachash was. Who was at the register? The Nachash was. Who locked up the store at 6 p.m.? The Nachash did. Because they were our servants. Now what turned is that the Nachash decided that he wanted to break the boundary and take over Chava. He desired Chava. And the only way for him to get Chava would be to do what? To get rid of Adam, and at the same time bring her down to a level that he could access. It's not, yeah, probably have to hit the on button.
The snake,
The way around.
the nachash, the bottom part of the nachash has slits where there used to be legs.
Yeah, you go.
Yeah.
So we know that the Torah tells us that it had legs. So what the Nachash didn't count on, it would get downgraded too. You know, it didn't count on that. So every time we see a breach of a boundary, there's an irbuvia between Tov and Ra. And what Hashem had to do after the Chet was restore some level of boundaries. Was Hashem successful in doing that? No. And things deteriorated all the way down to the bottom, to where I just saw the Gemara in Kedushin, Daf Kuf Hey, says that it was so bad in the generation of the Mabul that no species even bothered trying to marry its own species. They were all mixed up, every animal, every bird, birds with this bird, animals with that bird, men with animals, animals with men. There were no boundaries anymore.
So it was a time where things
Sound familiar?
into different kinds
Sound
of-
familiar? Yeah. Which will bring us back to KAVA-NOACH in a moment. Yeah. KAVA-NOACH. I'm sorry, what was your question?
So I guess it was a time when there were all kinds of new creatures developing out of what?
Mutants.
Yeah.
Mutants. Yeah. Or not procreating at all, which is probably even more logical. They were not close enough. Maybe they were close enough to procreate. Maybe they weren't. I'm sorry. That's so Chazal, that same Gemara. It's all that story of the Mabul is in Sanhedrin Kuf Hey. So if we understand that Adam Chava and the Nachash created an erbuvia of Tov Ra that now needed, which means we went backwards. We went backwards from the objective of creation, right? Instead of going towards further differentiation, which Adam had the capacity to do. If Adam had stayed separate and not sinned, he would have continued to evolve. He started as like this angelic-like creature, humanoid, angelic creature. He would have progressed higher and higher until he would reach the ultimate level, and then there would be nobody, then the world would have been done. And that's it. That's all Hashem wanted. That's all Hashem wanted. Choose me. Choose me. And you'll elevate yourself and we'll have a relationship. That's all.
There's an ultimate level?
It's a very good question. The question is whether we stop evolving at some point. It's an unsettled question. But whatever it is, we know that there's a madrega, which is called Yemos HaMoshiach, and which we reach the point at which now have reached Hashem's goal for the world. But that doesn't mean that things stop. It could mean that things continue to develop from there. We have no idea. We don't know that far ahead. There are some people who say that the world will continue into up to 10,000 years, which is logical because, but Shabbos is Shabbos. There are the three hidden levels in the Seder, and this is all based on the basic principles of the Spheros, that there are 10 Spheros, right? Chachma, Bina, Das. And then the lower spheros, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, the 7 lower ones are what concern us. So what happens once we reach that level? Then we go up, we go to the interior world. That's not our issue. That's no longer in our realm of Bechira anymore. That's not our concern. It's not our task, as it were. Whatever happens, happens. So, so your question was, how did Noach know how to separate them? So, there was no way that he could know. So Chazal tell us that they came in pairs, and the teva itself differentiated them. Everyone had a cubby. They all had cubbies. They even ate in separate groups, according to Chazal. They ate in separate groups. What is this all about? What is this, Williamsburg? Separate seating at all meals? Right? Even in the house? Separate seating? Ladies in the kitchen? Yeah, you know why? Because we've had such a problem that we better get very clear where you belong and with whom you belong. And the teva would not accept any animal that was involved in mixing up its species with others. Would not do that.
So all those species were not
The ones who were unfaithful to their species were gone, and they came only husband and wife, which also indicates that they were their first and only partners. Okay, they came shnayim. So Ramban says that they came as pairs. He says, interesting, that the 7 kosher, Ramban's shita is that the 7 kosher birds also came in pairs. What do you mean? They're going to be shechted for karbanos? No, because if they have to be segregated in the way of kedusha. If you have 7 single male birds flying around, no, that's not what we're looking for. That's not the realm of kedusha that we're looking to reestablish. Okay, so I would say, but this is very important, that the teva served 2 functions. One function was the outer function of the mabul, which Zohar tells us was a mikvah. And there's many ramazim and gematrias and so on that link the idea of mikvah to these psukim. The world went to the mikvah, but at the same, because they had to, but at the same time, the teva represents the womb, the embryo of life reforming itself. Okay? So that explains many, many things. Explains, for example, why Noach didn't leave the teva until he was told to. A baby's not born until it's supposed to be born. Right? So inside that new womb of life, the world itself, which was the embryo, was forming itself just like an embryo does. First it develops, first it's a bunch of water, tohu vavohu, and then slowly limbs differentiate, eyes, until it becomes a person. That's what had to happen. That's what was going on over there. Each thing in its own, each limb, each digit, each finger, each organ, each part of the world had to develop. And by the way, what happens if it doesn't develop? We have a deformity. We have, it has to be developed. It has to do it. Okay. Now, so that's how the teva knew instinctively where it goes. Now, more importantly, inside the teva, we had to keep those distinctions that the Nachash broke down. So they're not allowed to procreate. No one is allowed to procreate inside the teva. In fact, the pasuk says very clearly, Noach, Ubanav go in to the teva, his wife and the daughters go into separately, and all of the animals instinctively kept separate in the teva, and they were forbidden to be together, which makes a lot of sense if you understand that in utero there's no procreation. There's no such thing. There's differentiation, but there's no procreation in utero. That's not logical. So what are you doing? If you do that, you're ahead of the game, mixing up, breaking down the boundaries again. 3 members of the teva did not listen. Does anybody know who the 3 were? The raven, the orev, the kelev, and Cham. Cham. What happened to them? So the Gemara is there in Kofei and Sanhedrin says that the raven, each of them were affected in the way, I'll put it this way, the way I understand the Gemara, in the way that they have their union with their mate. It says over there that the dogs go through an embarrassment, that their union is prolonged due to their anatomy, and everybody sees them and then they're embarrassed. The raven is just the opposite. It's very distant, and therefore there's no kesher between him and his wife. It's as if they procreate without an embrace, without long distance, as it were. And then Cush, his skin turned dark. He became identified with what? Choshech. Choshech. He started to resemble the Choshech.
Immediately upon landing, or even before?
In the ark. Hence, his first son is named, Cham's first son, Cush.
What does Cush mean?
What does Cush mean? African.
Well, now,
Ethiopian means dark. No, it always meant. The land of Cush is Ethiopia below Egypt. It's actually the southern part of Egypt. You know that Egypt and Ethiopia border each other, and they share the big river. Well, not everybody shares the big river, but the dams built on the Nile was a big machlokas now between Ethiopia and Egypt. What's that?
So what's the significance of the land of Cush?
Land of Cush was a place where the inhabitants were cursed. And why were they cursed? Because they did not follow Hashem's plan in the Teva to remain above animals, but rather fell below that standard. Even the animals stepped it up to be more human and to have a choice. They had some intuitive, the Gemara says that they had some sort of, like a little bit Ruach HaKodesh, that they just knew, even though they're only creatures of instinct, but their instinct told them to stay separate, but not these. So they were on the opposite end of the spectrum. They were dragging the world already in the wrong direction. Those three creatures, I'm sorry. Yes, sir. 5? We're at 5? Okay. Got 5 minutes to go. So why does Noach do to the Orev? What does Noach do to the Orev the first second that he has, according to the Ruach HaKodesh? He kicks him out. To get out of here. Tries to throw him out of the Teva. But there's only one thing. The Orev, according to Chazal, wasn't all 100% bad. He would later be very useful to someone. To Eliyahu ha-Navi. What did the ravens do for Eliyahu ha-Navi? They fed him. When he had declared a year of famine against Yaacov, they fed him. They fed him day and night. Just the opposite what they do to their children. They don't feed their children. Somebody mentioned, we said, because they don't recognize their children right away as different color, whatever it is, but they're achzari. They're distant. They're cold. And the very same ravens bring meat off the table of Yaacov, the wicked Yaacov, which shows you that they had glad kosher in his palace. Because how else could Eliyahu Navi have eaten it? He must have checked the shechita. Right? That means Achav's table was kosher, which is interesting, if you understand it that way. And what does this mean? What does it mean that the Orev would feed Eliyahu Navi? What is Eliyahu Navi important about? He reaches out to the Jewish people who have become like the Orvim, who have become darkened with sin. The Erev Rav, very good. And Ra'av, hunger. So that brings me back to KAVA-NOACH. Let's finish with KAVA-NOACH. What happened was on the first day of Parshas Noach, which was Shabbos in America, but Motzei Shabbos here, is that KAVA-NOACH was voted in as Supreme Court Justice after a terrible fight. Now, what was the fight against him? What were they accusing him of? The sin of the generation of Noach, right? Just doing what... Very ironic. They said, you can't be a representative of good in the world because you're just like the evildoers. But the reality is that it's not the case. because KAVA-NOACH represents 2 of the 7 Noahide mitzvos that that America had turned away from, and therefore America was heading for a mabul. Now, if you happen to notice, there was just a mabul in America. A little bit of a mabul anyway, right? Where? Where in Florida? Who lives over there? It was the party. It was the most, how should I say, hefker. The city that was the spring break, which is complete hefkerus, was destroyed.
What city is that?
I think it was called Mexico Beach or Pana, something like that.
Panama Beach?
Mexico Beach, Florida. Look it up. They said that was the #1 destination for spring break, where what? Where people did whatever they wanted. And Hashem's warning America, you gotta correct things now. We have to turn this around. And KAVA-NOACH, as a Catholic,
Like New Orleans.
yeah, believes 2 things. He says he is not for Roe v. Wade, which is Ritzicha, one of the 7 mitzvahs of Noah, which America then endorsed, which is against Hashem's will of Shev Mitzvah B'nai Noah, partial birth abortion, which is clearly murder. And the second thing is he does not believe in gay marriage. Now, they're not talking about it right now as an issue, but it may come back as an issue. Again, totally against the Shev Mitzvahs B'nai Noah. So what happened was, in his short stay as president, 2 justices have come to America and been installed who are basically much more in line with the Shev Mitzvahs B'nai Noach than the other chevra. And that's good for America. This Rabbi Kessin speaks about it at length. If you go onto his TorahThinkingSite.com, he speaks about it at quite length, that his position is, his understanding is that America is going through a cleansing process, and we're moving in a proper direction. And that, I'll add one last thing. The difference between the generation of the flood and the generations after, and we'll continue this next time, was that Hashem punished directly up until that point. When Adam and Chava sinned, all of a sudden Hashem shows up in Gan Eden, says, listen guys, you have a penalty, Ara Adama, Chava, you have, you're going to be Eitzavan, Telet, yeah, and Nachash, you're going to crawl on your back. Immediately, they were called in for discipline. The generation of the Mabul, they were called in for discipline. After that, we have the Keshet, we have the rainbow. Hashem says, I am not going to directly punish the world in a way which destroys the world, but I will do selective punishments. So a Mabul, there won't be on the whole world, but yeah, partial things there will be. I believe, as we move closer and closer to Mashiach,
And there will be hints.
that these natural catastrophes
They deserve
and
things that I'm not doing.
and all the warnings that we're getting are much more open and direct from Hashem than they've ever been. Now, you might have noticed, and this was unbelievable to me, that balloons floating from Gaza landed right here on 38. And I got it as a parent of a class, right? Now, a balloon is associated with children and fun and all sorts of good things and having a sweet innocence, and it's turned into something which is incendiary, which is blowing us up. Could it be that Hashem is trying to send us not so subtle warnings? These balloons that are flying all over Israel, burning up millions of things, is not that a wake-up call? We have to wait until it's hurricane whatever to wake up? So what does Hashem want? Hashem wants Am Yisrael to differentiate from the Umos HaOlam. It wants us to live our destiny as a Am Kadosh. And that means many things. But the first thing of it means attachment to Torah, which is the Or. If we don't have Tosefet Or, we're supposed to be Or La Goyim. We are supposed to be the translucent ones. If we're not, then we're Mebalbel the world. Similarly, if we do not keep Torah and mitzvos, where the Or is hidden, then again, we're diminishing the light. Number 3, if we go so far as not to keep Shev Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, then we're not even humans. And I don't have to go into details, but in Israel, there's a lot of things that are going on that are not, unfortunately, defending life properly and not allowing sanctity and relations and all that stuff is just, it's not yet.
So we're responsible for the confusion of the nations?
If we are not differentiated ourselves, then the nations are mibulbalim. If we are kadoshim, the goyim know it. Goyim will always come to a tzaddik for brachos. A person who's filled with the light of Torah, the goyim are not stupid. They go running to those people, and they have always historically done so. Since when? Since Avram Avinu. The minute Avram Avinu comes out of where? Ur Kasdim, this Paksha, he's flooded with people. He's a superstar because he has the Or of Hashem, the first person to carry it. Anyway, so we'll leave it at that for now. I was asked to do a little bit of a recap. I hope there's a lot more that we'll talk about, but we're going to try to set a foundation by which what the purpose of Bereshis is and what happens in these parshios. And what's going on right now is that we have to decide to be Malei Or. We have to decide to be Malei Or. We have to speak up and be uniquely Jewish and stand up for the uniquely Jewish Torah and mitzvos and tell the entire world the truth. Otherwise, we might get a lot more balloons, unfortunately. Okay.